In today's episode, you'll learn how to make a delicious kosher cowboy ribeye steak using our Prairie Street Prime USDA Prime cowboy steak and these fresh ingredients.
Wow, how great does that look? Perfect medium rare. Whoa, that is a piece of meat. Welcome to Prairie Street Prime Culinary Kitchen. I'm Chef Erica, the guest chef for the day here in the kitchen. Today, I am making something super special. I am making our Prairie Street Prime, USDA Prime, beef cowboy ribeye steak. This is a serious piece of meat. Check this baby out. So what I'm gonna do today is I'm going to sear it in a nice hot pan. I'm gonna pop it in the oven to finish cooking it, get it to a perfect medium rare, right about 125. Then I'm gonna make a classic sauce for it. The classic red wine and shallot and mushroom reduction sauce. Super old school French, but it's a classic. It works every time with your steaks. Along with that, I'm going to make some herb roasted little baby potatoes and some green beans almondine. We're throwing it back to old school French today. Let's get started. One of my most important pro chef tips that I'll ever teach you is that you always want to dry meat off before you cook it. Remember that dry meat will never stick to your hot pan, so it's key that you always dry off your proteins. Now I'm going to season it. This is some nice coarse kosher salt. So I've got some nice salt on one side, and I'm taking my pepper mill, and we're doing a nice grind of pepper on the other side. Okay, now we're gonna go to the stove. Now my pan is nice and hot. Now I add my oil. Now we need to put this big steak into this pan. We wanna be safe. We wanna do this carefully. So I always tilt my pan away from me, and I lay my food in the pan away from me, just like that. That way, if any oil splashes, it's gonna go against the wall and not all over me. Okay, then I give my steak just a little wiggle, just to make sure that I'm not sticking. And we're gonna get a nice sear on both sides. Searing means we're cooking over a high heat. So that's looking pretty good. So I'm gonna flip this over, and you can see what nice color we're already getting on this meat. So now let's see how we're doing on this. Woo, beautiful. So now I'm just gonna sear my little sides here, and that looks great. And I'm getting a little bit of fawn building up in my pan. So I'm gonna move it right out, put it on my sheet tray here, and I'm gonna put this in the oven. Right in there, 400 degrees. So now we'll start making the sauce for the meat. What I'm going to do is put this pan back on the burner now. I've poured out the spent oil, and I'll put a little bit of fresh oil in there. I'm gonna let that oil warm up a little bit, and into that pan, I'm going to throw some shallots and my mushrooms. It's a classic mushroom sauce. So we're gonna start with some sliced shallots right into the pan. We're gonna throw those guys in there, and we're gonna add the mushrooms. Mushrooms have a lot of water in them, so they do take a while to cook. And the way to really get great flavor from a mushroom is to cook it a lot. Now we want to get these mushrooms and these shallots sauteing. What I'm looking to do with these mushrooms is to get them really soft and really cooked, but also get some brown on them. Mushrooms actually have a lot of similar qualities to meat, and you can actually make really nice dishes with mushrooms instead of using meat if you sear them really deeply. So we're looking to get that sear just like we would on a piece of meat. Okay, now look at those mushrooms. You see that sear? They look really good. They're deeply seared, golden brown. That is what we're looking for. Now, when you pour alcohol into a hot pan, we want to be safe about this, right? We always want to be safe when we cook. Take the pan off the heat, and I add my red wine. Woo. Now, you can see how the wine is really starting to boil. We are boiling this down to cook the water out of the wine. So we're gonna let that reduce down a little bit. Now, check out what's happened in here. Where did my wine go? Well, mostly it evaporated, and that's good. That's where I want that to be. Now I'm gonna add my chicken stock. You wanna use a high quality stock or broth, preferably an unsalted one, because you wanna control the seasoning in your food. So we're gonna bring this back up to a boil. I'm gonna grab my steak back out of the oven now. So I always double check with my thermometer. I want to get that perfect temperature. I'm looking for about 125 for my perfect medium rare. Looks great. Now I'm gonna take this meat off of this hot pan. And I'm doing that because the pan is hot and I don't want the meat to continue to cook. So I'm gonna take it right off of that pan and I'm gonna put it right on my cutting board here because I wanna let it rest. Meats need to rest. And we're just letting that sauce simmer down and reduce a little bit more. Now, while that's happening, let's get going on our green beans. So these have already been blanched. I'm heating up my pan and I'm going to be cooking these in some kosher, non-dairy, vegan butter. So I'm gonna put a little bit of that in my pan and I'm just gonna let that start to melt. And then notice how it's sizzling a little bit. It's sizzling because there's some water in it. And I wanna let that water cook out first. And as that water cooks out, it's going to get a little nutty and a little browned. And that's the kind of flavor that I'm looking for. Then I'm going to add my shallots. So again, more shallots. This time we're using finely diced shallots. And I'm gonna put those in the pan. And we're gonna give those just a little gentle saute. We just want them to get soft. I'm also going to throw a couple of sprigs of thyme into my sauce as I finish it up so I can perfume my sauce with a little bit of thyme. Now my shallots are getting soft. Just gonna get them just the tiniest bit of a golden color. And now we're gonna put the nuts right in with the shallots and we're gonna let the nuts get a little toasted. So again, a little toss. So I've turned off the heat and now I'm going to finish this sauce with the vegan, non-dairy, kosher butter. That's what we call in professional cooking, finishing your sauce with a product like this. It's called monter au beurre or mounting with butter. This product works exactly the same, but I turn off the heat and I want to just let that vegan, non-dairy, kosher butter just gently dissolve into there. We don't want it to get too hot because we don't want the butter to break, right? We just want to gently melt that product into it, and that will emulsify with our sauce, which means it will become one with it, and it'll just become this delicious, silky, smooth, amazing sauce for our steak. I'm gonna just set that on a back burner, keep it warm, and I'm gonna finish up those beans. So I have my toasted almonds and my shallots. Now all I'm doing with my green beans is warming them up in there. They've been blanched, they're basically cooked. We're gonna just finish them up now in this pan. We're just reheating them, we're getting them coated in that flavorful shallot and almond combination. And we're just bringing those beans back up to a nice hot temperature. So those are done, and those look great, and they are ready to be plated. Our sauce is ready to go. We have these little potatoes. All I did with these was I cut them in half, tossed them with some olive oil, salt, pepper, a few herbs, rosemary, thyme. I put them in a hot oven, 400 degrees, 20, 25 minutes, and you can see they're nice and tender and soft, and they have that color. Look at that beautiful roasty brown color. So nice. Set those aside. And now, let's take a look at that steak. We let it hang out for a little while on the cutting board. I've got my green beans almondine. I've got my roasted potatoes, and I have got my red wine mushroom sauce. Let's take a look at the inside of this steak. Wow, how great does that look? So I'm gonna put a few of those beans right on my plate. Let's grab our potatoes. And I'm just gonna use my fingers here, and we're gonna plate a few of those nice crispy potatoes. So I'm gonna take my knife and I'm gonna do some nice clean, thin slices. I like to cut steaks like this in pretty thin pieces. I find that you get better flavor when you slice thinner. So just some nice clean, thin slices like that. And we can even slice some of this meat off of the bone section. Okay, now I like to put the bone on the plate because everybody likes to chew on a bone. And then what I'm going to do here is fan out some of this beautiful sliced steak, like that, kind of swirling around that bone, and then a few pieces from this end also, so that we get a good variety of steak cuts all on one plate, sort of like a steak sampler. Now, we have one more thing to put on this plate, and it's that sauce, that amazing mushroom red wine reduction sauce. And what I'm gonna do is just kind of put my sauce right in here along the edge of the meat, and then of course, let's garnish it. So let's put some thyme on there, and maybe a little rosemary to match our potatoes. And wow, Even I'm impressed. And I've been doing this for a really long time. Check that out. Here is our Prairie Street Prime, USDA Prime, Cowboy Ribeye Steak, served with roasted baby potatoes, green beans almondine, and a red wine and mushroom reduction. You don't get more classic cooking than this, and this is going to be amazing. Perfect for a holiday meal, for a really special dinner, a birthday party, celebration, something like that. It's gonna be fantastic. Well, it's the moment. Let's taste this steak and see how it came out. This is a big, delicious piece of meat, and I'm gonna take a piece from my perfect medium rare, get a couple of those mushrooms on there. Whoa. That is a piece of meat. I'm telling you. I rarely, haha, meat pun, get to eat meat of this quality and this caliber. It's amazing. It's buttery, it's tender, it's got that great beefy flavor. There's that minerally quality that I love in meat. Wow, so good. And you have the acidity, that deep, rich acidity from the wine sauce and the tannins in the red wine. The earthiness of the mushrooms. That is some really, really good steak. So before I sit down and eat the rest of this, let me just tell you that if you loved watching me cook this steak as much as I loved cooking this steak, you can find the recipe in the description below. And don't forget to subscribe to Prairie Street Prime's Culinary Kitchen. Send us a comment or two if you have something to say, like us, do all of those things that you do on YouTube. Thanks so much for joining me today in the Prairie Street Prime Culinary Kitchen. I had a great time cooking this steak, and I hope you do too.